What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, March 26, 2021, end of the week. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. We have a lot to talk about. As usual, we're going to do news for 1 hour. Then we're going to open up the phone lines, let you call on in with your comments, questions, observations, and opinions. Mike is in our control room taking care of business and keeping us out of trouble. And we might as well get on into the news right now. The other day, Joe Biden finally had a press conference to try and quiet all the questions that were arising from the fact that he seemed to be avoiding the press. And it's already turning into be a major disaster. It's already come on out that this press conference, as it were, was fully scripted. The questions were pre-selected. And Biden had cheat sheets that had all the questions he was going to be asked with the answers. And it even included photos of the reporters so he could identify them. It was really that bad. And Biden was working from a prepared list of reporters to call on. And he just struggled. And even with all that help, he lost his train of thought in more than a few places throughout the entire situation. But Biden's presser was just horrible, and everybody's calling him on it. Tucker Carlson did a segment analyzing Biden's press conference, describing it as slow and painful. Now, Biden is adding fodder to the dementia speculation as the spirited response on filibuster reform degenerated into a word salad where he just wasn't able to get the words together into a coherent sentence. And he made this interesting comment. Biden said, "I believe we should go back to what existed when I came to the Senate 120 years ago." His supporters are saying that he only meant that as a joke. He then noted that only 58 filibuster motions in 54 years through 1971, but 5 times that many in 2020. He may have forgotten that all of last year's motions came from his party, which was then the Senate minority. So not exactly a presidential performance. So Biden came on out claiming the filibuster is a relic of Jim Crow era and has been fundamentally abused by lawmakers. Getting on to other political news here, Cuomo's impeachment probe will now include claims he illegally prioritized COVID testing for his family in addition to the nursing home and sexual harassment scandals. So they're really piling up on him. And I hope they keep that focus on the nursing home scandals, but I think they're really trying to find some way to shove them off to one side. Cuomo apparently does not use email to communicate with staffers. He gives his orders either by phone or in person, which means there's very little of a paper trail that investigators are going to be able to use looking into the sexual harassment and the nursing home deaths. Out in California, there's a new poll showing that Latino voters are more likely to vote to recall Governor Newsom out there in California. And it really just speaks to the current state of affairs of Latinos being disproportionately impacted health-wise and economically by the pandemic and the lockdowns and the various other things that are going with that. Nancy Pelosi is supporting Newsom in the recall election. Pardon me. And she's saying that it's really unnecessary for Democrats to run. She says it doesn't really rise to the level of an idea, so she's trying to basically make that go away, but it's not going to work. Over at Twitter, CEO Jack Dorsey admits it was a mistake to block the New York Post's Hunter Biden laptop story. He is refusing to say whose idea it was or who authorized it. And if you remember, the New York Post was locked out of its Twitter account for tweets sharing the newspaper's reports on Hunter Biden's emails, the laptop, and the very salacious materials that were on it as well. And okay. Prosecutors are now starting to back away from statements and charges against the January 6th protesters. I'm sure the pollsters are out there saying, look, this is not going over well with the American people. And Reuters is out there outlining the walkbacks. And even more interesting, that the details of the walkbacks seem to prove the Department of Justice never actually intended to win any of those cases, but wanted to advance a political narrative about extremists. And basically, it was also a form of lawfare. Even though they couldn't get convictions on these, they were going to bankrupt these demonstrators and protesters with legal fees. Meanwhile, the government has endless taxpayer resources, that means you and your wallet, to fuel their weaponization of the judiciary. Now, you remember all those razor wire steel fences that were put up around the Capitol complex that cost $1.2 million a week and cut off access to locals? These have finally been removed more than 2 months after the deadly riots. So, again, they're beginning to realize this is not going over well with the American people, and so they're trying to pull back, and we can look at them trying to shift the focus to some other problem right now. Over at National Justice, this is reported through UNS.com, the Department of Homeland Security is preparing to use mass data collection, interagency prioritization directives, psychological operations, and online censorship to crush what it is calling domestic violent extremism, except it's all targeted on right-wing Americans. And so they're going to be coming after those of us who really don't toe the line of the liberal, Marxist, socialist, communist agenda. Meanwhile, a judge has rejected a request to move the trial for the cop involved in the Breonna Taylor raid. His defense attorney was claiming the jury pool has become tainted with negative publicity, and the judge says, no, that's not a problem. We're going to continue the trial in the current venue. Now, Al Sharpton, who's a well-known race grifter, has admitted he plans to spread rumors Sinema and Mencken are racist to strong-arm them into ending the filibuster. And that's something we've seen a lot of these racial activists do, is say, follow our agenda politically, or we'll tell all of our followers that you're racist, and they will respond accordingly. So it's a form of political extortion is what's going on here. I love this next story. Kamala Harris's niece, Mrna Harris, following the shooting in Boulder, Colorado, came on out with all these tweets slamming white men for violence and shooting and the deadly assault and all this horrible stuff. Of course, the shooter is a Syrian-born Muslim, and Mrna Harris is out there trying to delete all of her tweets, but the damage has already been done, and she's looking, first of all, rather foolish, not having the available facts, and second, it just giving away the idea that there is an attack going on white people in this country right now. Okay. I forgot to start the YouTube. It is now running, and I got too many buttons here to keep track of. Okay. Okay, there we go. I need my own control slave here in this control room. I got all these buttons here. Let me show you, now that YouTube is working, what it is I'm dealing with here with the keyboard and the mixer and all the other stuff that's in this setup here. So there we go. All right, and I'm back looking rather debonair here. All right, GOP Governor Kemp has signed this election integrity bill, and Democrats were protesting it. One of them was actually handcuffed outside Kemp's office and taken away. Okay. Okay, we're going to talk about COVID-19 right now because that's still out there and there's a lot going on. Over in Kansas City, there's a councilwoman, Ms. Jeannie Marie Evans, and she received the first dose of the experimental mRNA shots against COVID-19 yesterday and passed away just hours later. Now, she was 68 years old. Kansas has very little of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine to be handing out. So they're relying on the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, and we know those have got lots of problems. Meanwhile, Pfizer and BioNTech have begun testing their mRNA vaccines in children between ages 6 months and 12 years old. 6 months old, and they're getting these shots. And they've got 144 participants are in these trials. They're going to get the 2-shot vaccine at 3 different dosages to test safety. Well, call me old-fashioned, but shouldn't the safety have been tested before it's injected into human beings, especially little tiny babies 6 months old who don't understand, and let alone have the ability to refuse? Okay, there is now a 30-second public service announcement. It's pro-vaccine. They want you to get the COVID vaccine, and it features former President Bill Clinton, former President George W. Bush, and former President Barack Obama. And they're standing there in these very dark, somber clothing, urging everyone to receive the coronavirus vaccine. The commercial is described as creepy, and that with these dark winter overcoats, these former presidents look like the Max von Sydow character from The Exorcist. Over in Thailand, they have suspended their mass vaccinations with the AstraZeneca jab because they too are seeing blood clot deaths arising from that. Now, Thai Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha and other government officials were originally scheduled to get vaccinated on the 12th during a scheduled morning program, but the announcement meant that the event of the Kingdom's Health Ministry did not push through. Reporters were informed of the delay only after they arrived. So again, this is turning into a horrible, horrible repeat of the swine flu debacle of 1976, where the vaccine killed more people than the swine flu itself did. Over in Great Britain, they have just extended their COVID laws until September of this year. So you can kiss the summer vacation goodbye. And Boris is out there. He sees off a Tory rebellion as the members of Parliament vote 484 to 76 to keep the draconian measures in place, despite the deaths falling 33% in just 1 week and hospitalizations plummeting. Okay. Story coming on out of the Daily Mail. Bill Gates is predicting that the world will not return to normal until the end of 2022. That's Christmas of next year. And says the pandemic could have been avoided if the world's leaders had invested in testing at the very start. This from the guy who gave the world Windows Millennium Edition and Windows 10. He's out there pushing this and forgetting the fact that the testing has been shown to be highly inaccurate. So getting everybody tested probably would not have had much of an impact on the illness itself. Bill Gates' comments have led to this other article. This is from Humans Are Free, and it says, "At what point do we realize Bill Gates is dangerously insane?" And they're saying this isn't an overreaction to Gates' latest, attention-grabbing foray into the news cycle. It's based on a long pattern of statements and behaviors, by Gates, who's one of the richest men. And were any of us normal people guilty of these statements, we would be institutionalized. Okay. This one's a really good one. If you thought double face masks and goggles were enough, Mexican researchers have solved the problem of eating and drinking while keeping the mouth space hermetically sealed against viral contamination. They have come out with a new mask design that blocks nasal exhalation, supposedly saving the wearer and others. In other words, the mask covers only the nose. And it looks rather ridiculous, I think. I put up a graphic there equating it to a fire engine red clown nose. And if that wasn't enough to worry about, we've been talking about this before, there are 2 U.S. states who are now monitoring 55, count them, 55 Ebola possible citizens. None are under quarantine, but 11 from Kentucky have been exposed in Africa, and the remainder have been exposed in another state which escapes my memory at this particular time, and they're watching. But if any of them are infected and this starts to get around, it's going to make COVID-19 look like a very, very minor inconvenience. Now, a long time ago, about 40 years, there was this huge scandal of tainted blood, where blood was being harvested from a variety of sources like prisons and being provided to hemophiliacs who promptly came down with AIDS, among other diseases, and it turned out the blood was not being tested. It was just being harvested and bottled, and this actually was happening, among other places, in Arkansas under then Governor Bill Clinton. So turning to the international news now, there's a story coming on out from uns.com about how America is literally lining up against the world because everyone has become a frenemy. We say they're friends, but then we hit them with sanctions and restrictions and basically throw the weight around. And rather than conform to how other nations are expected to behave, the U.S. has elevated exceptionalism and leader of the free world nonsense to a dogma that it actually believes allows the U.S. to behave without restraint in defense of what it claims to be its interests, most of which tend to be tied up with corporate profitability. Now, Joe Biden's recent labeling of Russian President Putin as a killer, combined with a threat to make Russia pay a price due to its alleged meddling in American elections, is a perfect example of imperial overreach. Now, you cannot have it both ways. You cannot be out there saying that Russia was interfering in the November election at the same time you're trying to convince the American people there's no reason to go back and audit and double check that election. So it's a little bit of double standard coming from the government. There has been an attack on a Saudi oil terminal using Houthi drones, and it leaves one of their fuel tanks on fire. Another wave of drones targeted nearby cities. The first projectile struck an oil terminal in Jizan, igniting a fire. No casualties, fortunately. And more of the suicide drones were targeted on the Jeddah airport. So things are getting ugly over there. They've been ugly for a long time. That's been just dragging on forever, those poor people of Yemen. Alrighty, South Korea and the United States are going to stage a major springtime combined military exercise starting next week. They're scaling it back a little bit because of the pandemic, according to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Now, whether to hold the regular exercise has drawn attention as the Unification Ministry and some civic groups have called for its adjustment to help move forward the stalled inter-Korean ties. Pardon me. North Korea has long demanded a halt to such provocative and inflammatory joint maneuvers. South Korea still wants to approach North Korea about reunification, and that is something the United States clearly does not want to happen. Meanwhile, 19 Chinese and Russian aircraft intruded into South Korea's air defense identification zone Tuesday, forcing the U.S. ally to scramble fighter jets in response. 4 Chinese warships, followed by 15 Russian aircraft, entered the Korean air defense identification zone. And South Korean Air Force fighters were dispatched in response. Want to know where your tax money goes? Because it's not going to the roads, it's not going to the bridges, it's not going to the rail lines here. The United States spent $34 billion with a B to house troops in South Korea and Japan between the years of 2016 and 2019. And this was according to a report released by the Government Accountability Office. And it basically said the U.S. is spending all these billions to maintain a massive military presence in Japan and South Korea. The U.S. has about 28,000 troops stationed in South Korea. From 2016 to 2019, the U.S. military obligated $13.4 billion to house troops in the country. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here, and again, a friendly reminder and a nudge in the ribs that Republic Broadcasting Network needs your continued support so that we can improve our services and our facilities in order to continue our mission of keeping the American people fully informed so that they can make good choices. And let's see. All right, I just got an updated report here from the control room. Anyway, the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. And if you send in a donation of $100 or more, include your t-shirt size and a return address, and you will get a spiffy official RBN t-shirt. If you send in a donation of $115 or more, you will get the t-shirt and an RBN coffee mug. We just got those in, and those are going to be out there as well. Meanwhile, of course, the front sight firearms promotion is still ongoing. Getting on back to the international news, there's a story here in Russia Today talking about how the United Kingdom is actually making extensive plans for war in space. Now, that's not really a radical idea. You've got the U.S. Space Command is getting ready to do exactly the same thing. We had the Star Wars project, otherwise known as the Strategic Defense Initiative, much of which was going to be done in space. Huge amount of money, not much of any use came out of that. But everybody's getting ready to start fighting the next war above the Earth's atmosphere. Now, I am opposed to this. Well, I'm opposed to war in general anyway, but I'm opposed to war in orbit because of how much damage can be done to communication satellites, Earth management satellites, the MTV satellite, and other things by all the debris that's going to be floating around from the destroyed targets, because it's not just going to fall down to the ground like an aircraft that's shot down. It's just going to, those pieces are just going to go into other orbits. And it's going to be a real danger. We could literally make near-Earth space too dangerous to travel through. Okay. Over in Israel, the election results are starting to come on in. It shows the nation deeply divided over Netanyahu's future. Neither side has secured a significant majority, and that means that Netanyahu is going to have to successfully form a coalition government, or there will be a fifth election somewhere in the future. So obviously a lot of people in Israel are not very happy with what Netanyahu has been doing. Earlier this week, there was a story that we had on whatreallyhappened.com about the Red Arrows, which is the Royal Navy flight demonstration team, and they use a total of 9 Hawk T-1 jets. Unfortunately, they have now had a problem. There was a jet crash caused by suspected engine failure. The 2 pilots survived, but they're in the hospital, and the Red Arrows are grounded until they can find out exactly what caused the crash. Getting to the economic news, the dollar's purchasing power has hit another record low, and if the Federal Reserve wanted to destroy the dollar, they're certainly getting their wish right now. The Consumer Price Index rose 1.7% in February over the previous year. This is the fastest year-over-year increase in 12 months, picking up speed from the stall in April and May of last year. Prices of goods are rising sharply. We're seeing that here in Indiana. There's all kinds of shortages of durable goods after stimulus-fed red-hot demand, and food prices are rising as well. And over in the Suez Canal, that blockage there is not going to help things because there's a lot of commercial traffic goes through the canal, and right now it is just jammed up. Satellite images are revealing just how many ships are backed up and unable to get through. The story we are getting is this giant cargo ship, the container ship Evergreen, or Ever Given rather, it's lodged in the Suez Canal. It literally turns sideways so that you've got the bow of the ship in one bank and the stern in the other bank, completely blocking it. They're trying to get it moved right now. The U.S. has volunteered to come in and render assistance, but it's just causing a huge, huge mess. They're blaming the wind for it, and with the ship that large and massive, I'm having a hard time believing that's the real cause. Either somebody made a mistake steering that monster ship, or maybe, given all the computer controls, somebody hacked it just to see if they could block the Suez Canal. But they're describing the ship looking like a beached whale, and they're saying it could take weeks to get that ship free. Now, the Ever Given is 430 yards. It's almost as long as the Empire State Building is tall. That is a lot of ship. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show. So we're talking about the economic damage that is being done by this cargo ship, the Ever Given, just basically log jammed in the Suez Canal right now. The Suez Canal was built a long time ago when ships were a lot smaller, and I think the time has obviously come where the Suez needs to be widened, and I know it's going to be a long, expensive process, but the Suez needs to be widened to accommodate these new super ships. That to me would be wise management. Alrighty, over in India, farmers have begun a 12-hour national shutdown as protests against the new farm laws enter the fifth month. Now, in November of last year, thousands of farmers began protesting on the outskirts of Delhi to force Narendra Modi's government to withdraw the new farm laws. The farmers were concerned that the laws will dilute the minimum support price system and let market forces influence their earnings. And farmers across India early this morning kick-started a 12-hour national shutdown called the Bharat Bandh, marking exactly 4 months since they started the protests. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has announced sanctions on relevant United Kingdom individuals and entities, and this was apparently in retaliation for the United Kingdom imposing sanctions on Beijing based on allegations of human rights abuses in Xinjiang. And the move was slammed by China as based on nothing but lies and disinformation. And we don't really know what's going on in Xinjiang. We get so much propaganda and lies fed to us, it's almost impossible to find out what's really going on over there unless you're getting a shortwave radio and listening to the Chinese broadcasts in English. But everybody's taking these things, oh, Russia interfered with our election, and China did this, and Iran did that, and they're playing economic games with that. Getting on to the area of immigration right now, Biden has stated that he would be flattered if migrants are coming to the United States because they know he's a good guy. Biden also blamed Trump for dismantling the immigration system during that press conference that we talked about earlier in the program. Now, little bit of good news for you gun enthusiasts out there. A federal appeals court yesterday sided with a coalition of gun advocacy groups by ruling that the BATF cannot classify bump stocks as machine guns for the purpose of federal firearms regulations. In other words, those bump stocks, at least based on this appeals court decision, are legal. And, bump stocks, for those not familiar with it, these are devices designed to assist a shooter by increasing the firearm's rate of fire. Now, interestingly enough, the bump stock was originally developed to have people who had been injured in their shooting hand and couldn't really deal with the trigger to fire a gun simply by snugging it tight into their shoulder, which I think was a really good thing. So the bump stocks apparently were out there. Now, bump stocks were used supposedly by the gunman or gunmen who opened fire during an outdoor concert from the 32nd floor of a Las Vegas hotel back in October of 2017. And the incident led or manufactured strong public support for outlawing bump stocks. Well, that is now being taken apart, and by golly, I would get one of those bump stocks if I actually had an AR-15 to put it on. It would be silly for me to get a bump stock. What would I do? Hang it on the wall back there and say, see, I've got one. Okay. I like this one. While discussing gun control during the Tuesday Democratic debate in Charleston, this is actually a flashback. Joe Biden basically made the claim that over 150 million Americans were killed by gun violence since 2007. That's basically half the U.S. population. So even back then, his mental deterioration was becoming manifest. And again, it does reveal how strongly anti-gun Joe Biden is, but of course he doesn't need any guns. He's surrounded by armed Secret Service all the time. Interesting article that came out of Touchstone Connect. It's called The Mathematics of Countering Tyranny, and it's talking about the media-driven hysteria to again push for a ban on firearms. It's coming across as kind of patronizing, lecturing, and chiding, and it's intended to support or to generate manufactured public support towards greater restrictions by Congress. Now, the gun grabbers have the dream of somehow getting rid of the Second Amendment, somehow magically removing all detachable magazines, semi-auto rifles from civilian hands, which includes hunting weapons. Let's be honest about that. It is a dream that they cherish, but again, we do have that Second Amendment, and an armed person is a citizen, an unarmed person is a subject, and you need to keep that in mind. Over in Turkey, in Istanbul, they got hit with snow this last Wednesday. This is, shall we say, a highly unusual event, and this, again, reminds us that all this talk about human-caused global warming over the last several years was just more government lies to separate us from our money and to get us to be more obedient to some of the globalist agendas. There was even a brief hailstorm reported in some of the areas. The sudden snow also delayed travel as bus stops and stations were crowded, and underwater rail service linking the city's European and Asian sides was packed with passengers who tried to avoid traffic on bridges over the Bosporus. Okay. Now, science news. I got a lot of emails from people the other day when we sort of got into science for the latter half of the show, and they said, yeah, we want more science. We already know the government's messed up. We already know the politicians are corrupt. We already know all that stuff, and hearing it day after day after day is kind of depressing because nobody seems to have a solution other than that crowd that wants to polish up the guillotines. So we're going to do a little more science news here, and then we're going to open up the phone lines, probably a little early today. Story coming on out of Scoopy Web, and they're talking about NASA's Space Launch System. This is the most powerful rocket ever built. It is more powerful than the Saturn V. The boosters are taller than Nelson's column, for those of you who've been to London. And it produces 8.8 million pounds of thrust, and if I recall correctly, the Saturn V's first stage produced 7.5 million pounds of thrust. So this is already going to have a much larger payload, and they're going to be using this to launch the Orion spacecraft back to the moon. And I'm glad we're going back to the moon, because as it turns out, there's a lot of very valuable minerals very close to the surface, and if we could get the kinks out of mining on the moon, we could make space travel commercially profitable, and then it would really take off. The model I like to use is the history of aviation, starting with Frederick Whitehurst's first powered flying machine, and then you went through the Wright brothers and a lot of just experimenting around until the first time somebody got the idea that they could use these aircraft as weapons or for profitable purchases, hauling the mail, passenger, and then of course aviation exploded, leading to the current situation of the 747 and other large super aircraft straddling the globe. Over the Pacific Northwest, and especially over Seattle, the SpaceX rocket booster that put up the latest satellites for the Starlink constellation re-entered over the Pacific Northwest at night and just provided this amazing fireworks display as it splintered and burned up while re-entering the atmosphere. And there's been a lot of videos that were shot with smartphones and whatever posted to social media, and it really was spectacular to see that happen. Okay, NASA sets the date for the first helicopter flight on another planet. It's going to happen next month, probably early in the month. And this is Ingenuity, the dual rotor drone. It is being tested and having its batteries charged by Perseverance. And it's going to perform humankind's first ever powered aircraft flight on another planet. And I know we had that call the other day saying it couldn't possibly work. The air is very thin on Mars, which is true. But you need to understand that the gravity on Mars is also a lot less than we have here on Earth. And the rotors are something like 1.4 meters long. So it's definitely going to be getting on up there. Interestingly enough, okay, the Ingenuity helicopter is flying with a small piece of history. It contains within it a patch of material taken from the Wright Flyer, the plane flown by the Wright brothers in 1903. And some people will say, oh, why are you bothering doing that? But you know, there's a lot of people who want to link the history together. And to share a little story from the Viking days, there was this little target that was set up for the cameras to test them, and it had color patches all over it, and it also had embedded in it a penny as a resolution test. And rather than just any penny, it was a mint condition penny, like the first issue of the Lincoln Cent. And this was not paid for by taxpayers' dollars. One of the mission people went out to a coin store out of his own pocket and bought this coin and said, this is the one we're going to put on the Viking. So one thing about the people of NASA, they do have a very, very strong respect for history and fellow explorers and where they've been before. Speaking of blades, there's a Spanish company developing a wind turbine that doesn't have blades, and it's rather interesting. This is a vane that stands upright, and it vibrates in the wind, and the vibrations generate electrical power. And the reason for this is that the current wind turbines that are the rage among all the liberals have a bad habit of slicing up the birds that fly among them, because when you put these wind turbines where the winds are blowing, those are also where the birds are going to be flying to get a free little energy boost to help them on their long migrations. So unlike typical wind turbines, the Vortex bladeless basically uses the movement caused by air hitting its 10-foot pylon to generate the power. And so that's definitely a green solution that is truly green, and I wish them a lot of luck. Okay, getting into some of the wokeness, weirdness that are out there. Out in California, the Board of Education has approved a new ethnic studies school curriculum that has students chant to the Aztec god of human sacrifice. We reported on that before. And it's now encouraging a counter-genocide against white Christians, including those white Christians whose taxes are paying for the California Board of Education. A professor of gender studies at the University of Rhode Island basically compared transgender people to QAnon conspiracy followers and claims the belief that a person can change their gender is a trans-sex fantasy, needless to say, facing a furious backlash. Rented lips. Again, in Rhode Island, Democratic lawmakers are complaining that the Senate dress code, which mandates blouses, slacks, collared shirts, and jackets, is oppressive and biased towards white people. So, here's an interesting little article and it's from uns.com, and it's talking about the feminization of Western man. And they're responding to the recent trend where fashion designers are designing skirts for, shall we say, the more androgynous men who apparently are shaving their legs and are going about in skirts. And yes, Scotsmen wear kilts, not because they have transgender complexes or have lost their manliness. Originally, the Scottish kilt was a full-length garment, a cloak, and it originated as battle clothing for the free movement it made possible, and the pleat offered some protection like armor. So the short kilt originated in the 18th century as a protest against King George, but the fashion designers designing skirts for men are saying it's got nothing to do with the kilt. They just feel that, women should dress like men and men should dress like women, and no, I don't think so, not on this body, and my legs are, for the record, extremely hairy. Okay. There is a weed killer out there called paraquat, and you've probably heard it before. There we are. And it's been used all over the country. And now they've discovered, after all these years of use, it can cause Parkinson's disease. And needless to say, there are multiple lawsuits being filed alleging that paraquat causes Parkinson's disease. And the first case to go to trial over the allegations against Syngenta over paraquat and rancid lips Parkinson's was originally scheduled for April 12th, but rescheduled for May 10th in St. Clair County Circuit Court in Illinois. And the trial is expected to be delayed due to precautions related to the COVID-19 virus. Now remember, if you were back in the 60s, and actually if you can remember the 60s, you weren't really there to begin with, but the government tried to discourage marijuana use by spraying paraquat on the marijuana plants. And the running joke at the time was the government was going to get rid of killer weed by using weed killer. And now we have to wonder how many of those dopers and college students now have Parkinson's disease because of that decision. We're going to go ahead and open up the phone lines, area code 512-248-8252. And we're going to scrounge up a little bit more news here. There's an article that is out of, patriotrising.com, asking if there has ever in U.S. history been a more pitiful cabinet than we are seeing right now under Joe Biden. And one of the reasons is Joe Biden and his administration, or shall I say the Biden-Harris administration, they aren't picking cabinet members based on ability, but they're going down a checklist. We've got to have one, we've got to have a black, we've got to have a Hispanic, we've got to have a gay, we've got to have a trans, we've got to have lesbian, we've got to have this and that, and all of it. And they're not necessarily getting the better people with that kind of an approach. But if you will look back at the history of the rise of the Nazis in Germany, one of the things Adolf Hitler did was he attracted people who, because of their particular conditions in life, shall we say delicately, were not likely to achieve positions of power. And then he would elevate them to positions of power, which they knew they would not possibly have without him, and they became intensely loyal. Okay, phone lines are open, 512-248-8252. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here. The phone lines are open, 512-248-8252, and we're going to go to Kelly in Austin. Hello, Kelly. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, mining on the moon. I hear people talk about that, and I'm very skeptical about that for several reasons. Depending upon the type of mineral deposit you're looking at, in the vast majority of cases, you're going to have on-site facilities and staff to be able to separate the ore from the gang.
Yes.
So that you can concentrate the ore enough to be able to ship it back economically. Otherwise, if you don't do that, then you're going to be sending back many tons of gang material of no economic value.
Well, there are definitely things that have to be worked out there, but it depends on what you're mining for. I mean, nobody's going to go to the moon to mine iron or copper or anything like that, but there could be rare earths up there. There could be diamonds up there, for all we know. I know here on Earth, diamonds are associated with volcanoes, but again, until we explore the place and we go out prospecting, we don't really know.
Well, yeah, but even if it's rare earths, you're talking about doing a lot to separate the ore from the gangue, and in that case, it takes even more concentration by some process like flotation or whatever. And I'm not sure how well that would operate in a low gravity environment such as the moon. So this is something they're going to have to think a whole lot about, unless they can fully automate that process somehow. But I'm not sure how they could effectively do that.
I imagine a great deal of automation would be involved in that, along with the, nuclear power to make it all work.
Well, absolutely, it had to be. But I mean, as I look at it, and I've been around many mining operations in my life of different kinds. I can tell you that it's something in an environment, so a lunar environment in particular. The extraction and separation and concentration processes are going to be are going to be far more difficult than they are here on this planet. And so, if there's any chance of mining anything on the moon, that's a long way off.
Well, yeah, probably not going to be something that I'm going to live long enough to see. In fact, probably we're going to see mining on the asteroids before the moon, simply because it's going to be a lot easier to get whatever is mined on the asteroids back to Earth.
I don't know. I mean, I look at those as being about the same. You still have the same technical issues related to mining and separation of ore from gangue. Now, the asteroids may be more enriched in certain metals that we really need.
Well, there's that one asteroid out there that they estimate is actually worth more than the entire Earth because of all the very valuable minerals that the spectrograms reveal are there. Maybe they could, figure out a way to maybe crash that into the moon and mine it there, or nudge it into an orbit around Earth and mine it and just, drop things down. We might have an actual area of Earth set aside to just drop stuff on that comes down from space.
Yeah, like Washington, D.C.
Well, I wasn't thinking that, but, like the National Radio Free Zone, which is just northeast of us here, where they do all the really sensitive radio telescopes and no transmitters are allowed. Okay, Kelly, stay on the line. I got to take a break for station identification. I'll come right back to you. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open. Area code 512-248-8252. We still have lines open right now. We're talking with Kelly in Austin. We're talking about the technical difficulties involved in mining operations beyond the Earth, out in the asteroid belt, or the near-Earth asteroids, rather, and on the moon. And I'll be the first to admit there's going to be a lot of problems, but if they can get the unit cost of extraction to be economically competitive, then it's going to start happening. And as the Earth's crust gets mined out, I mean, we're having to dig down deeper and deeper and deeper to get the materials that we need, whereas on the moon and the asteroids, it's just going to be lying pretty much close to the surface, the way the Earth was before we started all of the mining.
Well, yeah, but I mean, before you start mining something, you have to do an assessment of how the ores are laid out and what the concentration of the ore is within the ore body itself, and that takes a great deal of work up front. I mean, even on Earth, for example, if you go out to look at something like a copper, lead, zinc deposit, that entails extensive drilling. But before you can actually delineate the limits of the ore body and then come to some determination about the actual concentration of the ore within that large mass of rock. And I don't see how it's going to be really any different on the moon. You don't just send something up there and just start digging holes in the ground. And then when you get to the point where you start extracting things, which is not take up there, you're probably going to have to look at, say, surface extraction. There are mining engineering considerations that have to come into play again there, such as the stability of the quarrying operation itself, because you want to maintain stable walls. You want to make sure it's not going to collapse in on yourself.
Yeah, the same problems that we have to deal with here on Earth, just taken out, to the moon and the asteroids. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but at some point we're going to find that space can be commercialized, and it's really going to take off that time.
And I agree with you. I agree with you, but I don't think it's any time in the foreseeable future. We'll be long dead before.
No, I'm not going to be applying for work on a lunar mine, but I'll just be happy if I live long enough to see a man on Mars.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is your science topic today.
Okay.
Well, thanks for taking the call. Bye.
You've got it. We're going to switch over to Al in Canada. Hello, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. We don't need to be going to the moon or mining asteroids. I mean, all we need is better resource management and recycling. Just burying stuff and just letting it sit there for, and on top of that, building houses on top of it after about 20 or 30 years is just ridiculous. It's just stupid waste, and that's what we are. We're stupid, and we're wasteful.
Yes.
I didn't want to talk about that, but I did send you that Twitter thing, that Biden falling down the stairs. Did you see that?
Yeah, I've seen it. It's kind of floating all around the net, and
that's hilarious.
It's very excellent editing and CGI, and it is hilarious.
Yeah, I wish you would have done that. When I first saw that, I really laughed really hard. Anyway, this wokeness, liberalism wokeness has gone too far with this Sesame Street thing.
Yes.
So what they're doing is they're indoctrinating kids into thinking that there's a difference between people right off the start.
That seems kind of opposite of what Sesame Street was doing at the very beginning.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to make this real short, and I'm going to tell you something that, and when I saw that story and I read it, it made me think about this. When I was a kid, I didn't know what hate was. I had no idea.
Yes.
And then when I got older, I discovered liberalism. Thanks for your time, Mike. Take it easy.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Bruce in Texas. Hello, Bruce. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, hello, Mike. Getting to NASA, I mean, I'm not a NASA downplayer or skeptic about going to the moon. But what disturbs me about NASA lately is it looks like it's turning into just another diversity promotion program. And they're putting out quotas for races and sexes just like corporate run operations on Earth are.
Yeah, it's a tragedy.
I don't think that's very wise. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying just white men should go to the moon. I'm saying the best of whoever they are should go. Because so much money is invested in something in an operation like that, that's to put a less capable person in a position.
You endanger the mission. You endanger the crew.
You endanger the mission. Well, I wouldn't put past them to go in that direction anyway. In fact, they are.
Okay.
And, it's pretty disappointing. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. But again, NASA is dependent on government funding, and the government sets the policies. And, there was a big stink, about getting the first American woman into space because the Russians had done it already with Valentina Tereshkova. And, so the U.S. really lagged behind on that part of it. But again, I think merit should come first, and the issue of gender and race should be sort of erased from it. It's kind of like looking at the resumes of a hire with the names blocked out so you can't make any assumptions about them.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point about government funds it and Congress funds it, where their politics lies. I think if they went with a colorblind and sex-blind selection process, maybe they won't like the answers. So.
Well, it doesn't matter what NASA does. The liberals are going to complain about it anyway. They're already complaining about, why are we spending all this money to go out into space when we have poor people here on Earth? Well, if you look at the economic boom that followed the Apollo missions, if we fund a return to space now, think of all the jobs that'll be created, and there will be much fewer poor people.
Yeah, and a lot of advances and discoveries and whatnot that were developed during the NASA era became common use items here on Earth too. this heavy launch vehicle, did you find a date that they project of the operation?
Well, I mean, they're doing the final testing now. There have been a couple of live fire tests here, and I think they're going to come up on an actual launch to orbit later this year. I don't have an actual date on that, though.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I missed the launches of the shuttle, and I was too young for Apollo, so hopefully I'll be able to make my way down and finally get to see a live launch. So that's about all I got.
Yeah.
You can take my call there.
Well, you've got it. And, one of the frustrating things about my time with NASA, I saw launches out from Vandenberg, and I worked at the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston, but I never actually got over to Florida to see a launch of anything, or even just take the tourist tour of the Kennedy Launch Facility. And that's been kind of frustrating. Maybe now that I'm a little closer to it, I'll make a point of getting on over there. Maybe I'll go to space camp. They have a space camp for adults and old geezers, which is going to open up later this year after the COVID pandemic. Anyway, we have lines open right now, area code 512-248-8252, and we're going to go to James in Vancouver. Hello, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
All right, Spock to Enterprise. Come in, Captain. Oh, sorry. Yes, that junk up there isn't actually floating.
No, it's in orbit.
Real fast.
Yeah, it's in orbit.
Yep. But a lot of people don't know how fast you have to be to go up to stay in that orbit. It's moving at 20,000 miles an hour, some of it.
Yeah, some of it. About Mach 25 is escape speed.
Well, anyway, I calculated that years ago, 7 miles a second. That's pretty fast.
Yes, it is.
If you were, all of those reporters used to say, up there in a state of 0G, you can see that it floats in the spacecraft because there's no gravity, right?
Well, they were sort of ignoring Newton's laws of motions there because it wasn't really floating. It was just in its own orbit inside the orbiting spacecraft.
Well, you don't want to complicate the people with the facts. But anyway, as to what's inside a object out in space and the Earth, NASA has what's called the Hughes gravitometer.
Yes.
And you can tell what's happening everywhere in the Earth using that thing.
Yes.
People don't know about that. But anyway, that's one question, if I might. When you say life on Mars, what are we talking about exactly? Are we talking about like, what do you call it, amino acids, or what would that be?
Well, we won't know until we actually can collect a specimen, but the indications from the Viking labeled release experiment is that the Martian microbes are similar enough to earthly microbes where probably we're going to see a lot of those same molecules. And astronomers looking out into space with these large telescopes, they're finding those same amino acids just existing out there, floating around. So it appears to be very, very common material throughout the universe.
Well, that you could do the Miller-Urey experiment with low-pressure gases like what's on Mars and get some idea.
Mm-hmm.
That might be something.
Well,
anyway,
I'm convinced there's something up there, and Dr. Gilbert Levin is convinced there's something up there, and there's a lot of scientists who looked at the Viking data who are convinced there's something up there, and we're all crossing our fingers and hoping that a Martian rabbit hops in front of the rented lips Perseverance cameras.
Well, I think there is life up there, and there's life in a lot of other places because you just look at the size of the universe, and the probability is not zero.
Well, when we say looking for life in outer space, we're being kind of chauvinistic because they say life as we know it. But the possibility is there's a lot of life out there that is going to be truly alien to what we have here on Earth. All you need is a self-replicating molecule and some liquid medium and some source of energy, and sooner or later it's going to happen.
Well, it could be based on silicone. Silicone's right under carbon, right?
Yep.
So you've got the valence there, and then you've got phosphorus, or I think it's next to silicone, something like that. So that's your spin half particle that could run that DNA, you see. Something like that. Because in the human body, the DNA is run by the nitro.
Well, Michael Crichton, in his book, The Andromeda Strain, really pointed out correctly that life elsewhere in the universe might not even use DNA, that it might have some other form of organization and control.
That could be very true, as long as it can replicate itself.
Yes. I mean, DNA is a kind of recent evolutionary trend. Before that, the self-replicating molecules were RNA, which we still see in a lot of viruses, and scientists have found evidence of even earlier self-replicating molecules based on simple sugars.
Well, that's what makes the retrovirus so nasty, because it's RNA.
Yes.
And well, I heard some very unfortunate statistics about that mRNA vaccine, and you were very wise not to take, you know what I mean. But, yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for taking my call, and we'll talk again.
All right, you've got it. The phone lines are open. Area code 512-248-8252, and we're going to go to Terry in California. Hello, Terry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. You had a caller about a month ago talk about he just pledged $30 a month on his credit card to RBN, and he challenged 1,000 other people to do the same. Well, I finally got around to it last week, and
well, thank you very much.
I got the wrong extension. Well, I got the wrong extension, and Mike was kind enough to take my information. But I hope I got in that first 1,000 people. Do you think I did?
I have no way of knowing, because I'm out here in Indiana and RBN is down in Texas, and they don't let me peek at the books. Not that I would want to look at the books. If I'd wanted to be an accountant, I'd be an accountant.
Well, I'd feel cheated if I didn't get in that first 1,000. But anyway, the other point I wanted to make is last week on 60 Minutes they did a thing about the black generals in the U.S. military, and there hadn't been one on the JCS since Colin Powell.
Yes.
And I've heard all these stories over the years about that, and the women opportunities in the military and all that. Every time I do, I'm retired, the back of my mind says, nobody's talking about combat readiness.
No, they're not.
The only thing that mattered, when I was in, I mean, they didn't care if you had flat feet and you really wanted to be in. You didn't get in. Sorry, because there might be some things that you can't do that somebody else could, So the whole priorities has gotten a little bit mixed up as far as I'm concerned.
You're absolutely correct about that, and we've seen that in the military during times of relative peace. But I can assure you, when a real war breaks out, war is the ultimate meritocracy. And
right.
Yeah, and that'll straighten that thing out. Anything else?
Yeah, just one thing. That woman that died after getting that shot, I'm supposed to get my second COVID shot, a Mrna vaccine from the VA here in a few days.
Yeah.
And was that the shot that she died from? The one you
Well, it depends
about?
on who you ask. Yeah. I mean, people are just saying it was weird. Yeah, I think there's a popular meme going around the internet right now that vaccines are the leading cause of coincidences.
Right, but when you said you gave a specific kind of shot, and I was wondering...
It was the Pfizer mRNA shot.
What about the Moderna? That's mRNA too, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's a different structure, but it's mRNA. And the problem, of course, is they're playing with the DNA of the patient. But every one of us, our DNA is different. It's not a one-size solution fits all. And there may be people whose DNA do not react very well to the RNA message. and that's why it's causing problems. And I think the idea was faulty from the very, very beginning for not recognizing that everybody's DNA is individual, and that if you're going to have an mRNA shot, it's got to be tailor-made for each individual patient.
Yeah, well, see, the thing that drove me to get it was the fact I got a lung problem.
Yeah.
And I said, I know if I get the COVID, I'm going to die. No question. But I thought I'll take a chance with this, and if there's long-term effects that are negative, I don't have long-term. I just worry about today, I can't get it. So that's why I got it. But anyway. All right, Mike, thanks for taking the call. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We have phone lines open right now, area code 512-248-8252, and we're going to go to Joe in Nome. Hello, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
You know that Bering Sea Gold show?
Yeah, I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah, that ridiculousness. One of these miners came out from Homer. He bought this old, a catamaran that had been turned into a dredge called the Wild Ranger, but that's not the point here. I met him in the bar. We'll call him Peter.
Okay.
And he started talking about this Flat Earth Society. Now, I didn't pay much attention. I thought he was pulling my leg. Here's a guy who claims that he was former SAS. He's got a British accent.
Mm-hmm.
So on. And apparently he never got in the water, but he was hanging around the town square, and some others raised an alarm about him.
Okay, Joe? Joe?
Yeah.
I'm going to put you on hold. Don't hang up. I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. Welcome back to our show here, and we have phone lines open right now. If you'd like to call on in, area code 512-248-8252. And we're talking with Joe in Nome, and we're talking about the Flat Earth Society.
Am I on?
Yes, you're on the air.
Oh, okay. So this Peter guy claimed to be former SAS. I asked him, Peter, how many people have you killed? And he kind of hemmed and hawed, and then he said he couldn't remember. And then he said 3 or 4. And I was like, how does a person, yeah. In other words, this guy's phony and in your face, and so these mothers raised the alarm about him hanging around the kids at town square, and they raised such a hue and cry that he went packing. And this dredge that he bought supposedly for $80,000, he turned around and sold for $40,000. Now it's parked down the hill from me here, where I'm at this approach pattern Superfund site. The FAA is cleaning up, but anyway, it turns out it was about, I don't know, a month or 2 later.
Yes.
The president of the Flat Earth Society was indicted for 56 counts of child molestation.
Ouch.
Yeah. Now, gee, I don't want to cast any aspersions on the Flat Earth Society, but gee whiz, is this idiocracy or what?
Yeah, well, I mean,
it's so in your,
yeah,
it's in your face, and it's spilled out to the whole world with this stupid Bering Sea Gold show. Christ. One of the big stars almost scalped a native girl because he didn't have flaggers on the highway when he's stretching the cable across. But yeah, Alaska's oldest newspaper is not going to tell you much about this. They cover this stuff up right and left. Anyway, that's it. It's idiocracy out there. That's all I got to say.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the phone call, and we're going to switch to Robert in Kansas. Hello, Robert. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. First thing I want to say is the Flat Earth Society is a government operation, a total fraud. It's a disinformation program. And the thing is, though, Mike, is that I'm real excited this topic is on your show because you're a very intelligent man. You IQ north of 150. You understand mathematics as I do. And the thing is, Mike, is that the Earth is actually flat, though. And that's what's so crazy about this. Yeah, I know. I sound like a stupid, crazy person.
Yes.
And I thought that about the people who told me that initially, too. But, Mike, it's all around us. The evidence is all around us. You don't have to trust me or any other person. But
well, let me ask you a question. Okay, you've seen a lunar eclipse before, right?
Yes.
Okay, and no matter where in the sky the moon happens to be, the shadow, the Earth's shadow, is always circular when it comes onto the moon, right? Now, what is the only shape that always produces a circular shadow no matter which way the light is coming from?
Well, you're right, Michael. In that regard, you're correct. But you can see examples, and I have video of this, where you have the sun in the sky along with the moon at the same time, especially these days. And you can see the sun and the moon right in the same sky.
Yes, that happens, during half of the lunar orbit.
Well, Mike, what I'm saying is to you, sir, is that this isn't really an argument. I thought this stuff was crazy, and I spent a couple years trying to disprove these crazy people who told me the Earth was flat.
Yeah.
And I went out and got some optics. I used the mathematics from NASA. So NASA puts out all the mathematics you need. It's a 25,000-mile circumference Earth. You have 8 inches per mile squared in terms of curvature, right? Because the function of the equation is exponential to get all the way around the Earth. And so you square the mile. And what I did is went out to disprove these people. And after a few years, I realized that the Earth is actually flat and that we're being lied to on a scale that is just, it's unbelievable what we're being lied to about. And so I ask you, sir, just to consider that these people that are in control, NASA and the government, everything they're telling you, if you were to look at the moon right now.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm not feeling well today, but you gave me a much needed laugh and a giggle here, and we got to let you go for a commercial break. We'll be right back. And welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go to Tom in Florida. Hello, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind, as if I couldn't guess?
Well, hey, yeah, Michael, yeah, good morning. Good day to you. I hope you have a great weekend. Yeah, what's on my mind is, before I go there, I was wondering if you heard bumbling Biden's speech today.
He made a speech today? No, I didn't see that one.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. It only showed like a minute of it, but he's bumbling, fumbling. He don't know where he's at half the time. But anyway, Mike, the reason I'm calling you had a caller yesterday called in right after me from Arizona saying that the Russians won World War II. No, they did not win World War II out with the Americans, because if the Americans would not have went in the Japanese theater, Pacific theater, and kept the Japanese out of going in against Russia, the Germans and the Japanese would have wiped out.
Well, look, all of the Allies together won World War II, and we can't really say that one party or the other did it all. But there's absolutely no question that the Germany's attempt to reach Moscow was an absolute military disaster. Was actually a disaster for both sides, unfortunately, but ultimately the Germans were forced to withdraw. And in the process, they lost a huge part of their army, and that really did turn the tide.
Well, let's not forget this too, Mike, okay? And I don't know if somebody else told you this, but without Detroit, Michigan, we would have never won. The Russians would have got their butt beat without Detroit. Without Detroit, Michigan, there would have been no Russia and Moscow and Stalin, okay? Because without Detroit, and the United States jumping into that war, the Japanese, and I do firmly believe the Germans and the Japanese together would have wiped out Russia and all of Europe. If the United States stays out of that theater, you can bet that Germany would have won and the Japanese would have won. And the Japanese were already kicking Russia's butt. So I don't buy into that crap. No, the Russians won World War II. No, they didn't. The reason they did have a chance to win the war was because the Germans had to take on the United States and the Japanese had to take on the United States, and that's why that war was lost by the Axis power. Now, I will say this. During World War II, they were getting fresh cake, the American troops, where the Germans were starving and the Russians had barely anything to eat, and the Japanese. But the Germans could send over a fresh piece of cake within a 12-hour period. They would be eating fresh homemade cake, in Germany. I mean, there are troops in Germany and even in the Japanese theater. So, no, the guy's wrong.
Tom,
the reason that the Russians won...
Tom, that thing about the cakes getting delivered was a propaganda stunt, because if you really think about it, everything being brought over from the United States to the war in Europe was being brought by ship. And it takes a lot longer than 12 hours for a ship to cross the Atlantic Ocean. But these situations were staged to reassure the people back in the United States through those newsreels that everything was just going swimmingly for the American forces, and very often it was not.
Well, Mike, you may be right. Maybe it was long. Maybe it was a 48-hour period. But I can tell you, the United States troops had way better supply line than the Russians did. So I honestly
no question
believe
about that. That part's true.
There's no question about it. If the United States doesn't take on Japan and Japan is able to team up with Germany, the Russians do not win. There's no way. And Europeans would have totally got wiped out because the Japanese and the Germans together probably could even defended the Italians. So they didn't get wiped out so fast. But
well, the Italians changed sides after they got rid of Mussolini. They changed sides.
Correct.
Yes.
But yes, and you got to Mike. Another thing you don't talk about is the Vichy French. There were still Vichy French in France. So
yes,
that's another thing. That's a different story. But I just want to say that I still believe that the savior of World War II was the United States of America. That's my opinion, and maybe I'm wrong, but I believe.
Well, I think it was definitely a team effort, and certainly the atomic bomb didn't hurt the cause, as it were.
Correct. I was getting to go there right there. You're right, Mike. Now, one more thing, Mike, before I go off that, and I hope that one guy calls, and he called in for a whole year bashing Trump, and you know who I'm talking about, the guy, our good friend Jersey, and I was wondering if he's going to call in and start ever talking about
next
what
on the list.
Biden's up to. I want to hear what he's going to say about Biden, how Biden's really been screwing up our country in the last couple of months here. It's insanity with this invasion on our border. It's absolutely absurd. By the way, Mike, here in South Florida, they just had a big bust down in Key West, Florida, where they caught 48 Cubans trying to sneak on a raft in Key West to come to Miami.
Yes.
So communism is not working out in Cuba. Okay, they had a big bust right now here in Key West, and now they busted a big ring. There's a Cuban ring here that's trying to bring all these whatever you want to call them, in Cubans or rafters in the United States, even to this day. So Cuba is a disaster. There's no food over there. There's no medicine. It's literally a disaster.
What do you expect Cuba to be like with this ongoing U.S. blockade that's been in place for, 60 years now?
Yeah, Mike, and I agree with that. But you know what? In the meantime, look, all these people that are coming to this country right now from Central America, why don't they fight for their own land? Why don't they kick their government out? They want to come here. Go fight for your own government.
Well, they're all being told they're going to get free stuff up here, and so far they're getting a lot of free stuff. The U.S. government is using our taxpayer dollars to lure these illegals here.
Absolutely. They want to take all the wealth away from the whites. Exactly what they want to do. And there's a lot of poor whites in this country. How many white people live in trailers, mobile homes? I mean, it's absurd what this government's doing. I say, Mike, like you said, Trump blew it Oakland with the mayor in Oakland, and I tell you right now, this bumbling buffoon Biden and the Democrats, in my opinion, should all be arrested and tried for treason against this country.
All right, Tom, I'm going to cut you off here because I get a lot of emails about your constant rants about immigration, and it does get repetitive and it takes up a lot of airtime here. So thank you for the phone call. And we're going to switch to Dustin in New Jersey. And Dustin, long time no hear from. I'm glad to have you back. What's on your mind?
I took myself off a milk carton this time.
Okay.
Mike, the only big bust going on right now in Florida is in spring break.
True.
Tom, man, Yeah, that's one of the reasons I haven't called it. It's just this constant legal aliens, the blacks, the Jews, blah, 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 blah. I like the science thing. I like Kevin from West Virginia about his particle accelerator. And I got a movie for Kevin called The Quiet Earth. You probably don't even heard. I think it was from the early 80s.
Yes.
It's a drama. It's kind of like the Andromeda Strain. It's a movie for thinkers, not stinkers, because most of the stuff out now is just, I don't know. Is there enough Marvel movies? It's just,
they're fun to watch. The CGI is great, but they are starting to get boring.
Andromeda Strain, it was a great flick, man.
Yes.
I liked it. But they made a series, I think it was in the 90s. It was pretty bad.
It was awful. It was definitely awful.
Yeah, it was. But Biden. I told you guys, I didn't vote for neither of these guys.
Okay.
Because what's changed? The bombings are still going on in Syria. It's like the whole rhetoric, sanctions on China and Russia. It's like it hasn't ended. It's a continuation of the same policies we had, no matter who's in. That's what George Carlin said. We know that, nothing's ever going to change, right?
Yes.
Be happy, Mike, be happy what we got. It sucks, but it sucks. It's like nothing's changed. None of these people, they all put their own friends in, right?
Yes.
They put their own friends in parts of, the government, either the Postal Service or this or that, who, quite frankly, don't even know what they're doing.
No, they don't.
And you can't get them out. They're federal employees, right? You can't get them out, so they're going to be in there for years without knowing what they're doing. And that's a continuation of this, basically what do they call it? Toward the end of a Roman Empire, it's the old bread and circuses, right?
Yes.
It's just going to keep deteriorating until I don't even know what's going to happen after it deteriorates, But, I don't know. Let me see what else I got to say. Mike, I got to ask you. You finally got Flight Simulator?
I'm still working on the old one. I haven't bought the new one yet. It's kind of a luxury right now for me.
Because you need some hefty hardware.
Yes.
To run it.
Yes.
Do you know you need a good internet connection? It actually streams the data.
I heard that.
The ground. Yeah, isn't that amazing, though? Like that, I guess that's part of, maybe the cloud, right? Like that part of, the technology, because we know that's very in its infancy, right? The cloud servers and all this other stuff. It really can't do what they claimed it could do, But
rarely do they actually do that.
But it is really amazing how they can stream the terrain. But, see, that's unfortunate. You need a fast internet connection and a fast computer to run that thing. And I got it on VR, so I got to run it at low resolution in VR.
Yeah, I'm jealous. I don't have a VR setup yet, which is a shame because one of my pieces of CGI software can actually display in 3D while you're working.
Okay, well, you know what? When you come into some dough, it's $299 for that Oculus Quest 2.
Yeah.
And they have the 3D movies you can watch on it, the ones that are animated, where actually if you turn around behind you, it continues the movie. So you're in that world. It's amazing. Really
I know. I've heard that. I've seen demonstrations at SIGGRAPH, but again, I'm telling the truth on conservative radio, and that's not exactly a huge moneymaker right now.
Yeah, I understand. But, Mike, if you do get one, there's another game, Myst. They have that in VR, and that's a good game for people who like to do puzzles, it's a thinking game. But did you ever get into that, Myst and Riven? Remember Riven, which was I thought it was very hard.
I remember Myst from years and years and years ago, when it first came out, and it was on, I think Windows 3.1 or something like that. But again, the only computer games I have are flight and space simulators.
Yep, Flight Simulator on 3.5-inch floppy because I have that still.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 3.1. It ran on 3.1.
Yep.
Yep, but Microsoft never went back to that series either, the flight simulator, which I thought was, the space simulator, which was good. But Mike, that's all I got to say. I'm still listening to the show. It's just I got tired of listening to the same crap. You know what I mean?
Hey, I get tired of talking about the same crap day after day after day after day, and I'd like to find something new. And I'm getting all these emails saying let's talk more science, and I'm going to start shifting the talking points away from the politics and the insanity, and I'm going to try and fit more science stories in there.
Oh, and then one more thing I forgot. Along with that Quiet Earth, that had to do with the particle accelerator and the CERN.
Yes.
The Mist was based on that also. That movie, The Mist, by Stephen King.
Yes.
Did you ever see that?
Oh,
that
yeah.
was actually about the military. Yeah. They were actually experimenting on a particle accelerator, and that's what pulled that world into the, onto the Earth, that particle accelerator. And, obviously it's a movie.
Yeah, it's a movie, and I think they're overstating the capabilities of particle accelerators.
That's all I got to say, Mike. Have a good night and good weekend.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Same to you, and we're going to go to Jeff in Ottawa. Hello, Jeff. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. Yeah, I think I might have called in once before a long time ago. So I just had something to say there about mining on other planets. It kind of reminds me of the cordless battery recharger, where you put 6 batteries in to recharge one. That's kind of how it is right now. Maybe in the future it'll be different.
I think it'll be different in the future. If there's a buck to be made, the businessman will find some way to make it happen.
Yeah, I think that actually maybe they can concentrate on mining under the ocean. If the ocean floor takes up most of the Earth's surface, it'd probably be a heck of a lot cheaper to do that in the
There has been some underwater mining for magnesium nodules, and the danger with mining the ocean floor is the methane hydrate. Which, if you want to talk about a nasty greenhouse gas, if that stuff was to really start warming up and melting and coming to the surface, it would be insane. It's weird stuff. It looks like snow, methane hydrate, but you can light it on fire.
Yeah, it's just that the whole thing, it seems to me like the expense of just putting the weight of a gallon of water going into space is so astronomical. It seems that it would seem to be more economical, but I don't know all the scientific details of it. So, yeah. And on the second point there, we're now past our first year of this garbage here up in Ottawa and whatever. And right from the very beginning, I spotted it as garbage, and I didn't buy in that Cuomo was a hero. I know I'm not going to criticize him, but a lot of your callers called in and said, he's a great guy, and all. They're completely out to lunch, and that includes people from certain northeastern, I will not mention it, states, and other people, and they're on the record. Not going to nag them. I found out because I was contacting a woman in one of the bands that I play in, or used to, about whether the rehearsal was on. No, and we both agreed and saw exactly what it was. And I saw over in China how they were falling to the ground in the worst acting I've ever seen. Oh, it's a terrible pandemic.
Yes.
Event 201, the whole thing, complete garbage. We have some... the people up here, the people in the stores, when I don't know, I know in the States it may be different, but when I go into the stores, they probably 50% don't even say anything to me. They don't wear a mask, never have, never will. I haven't even sniffles in over a year. I probably, nothing. And I go in, they don't do it. Then occasionally someone says, excuse me, sir, do you have a mask? Medical. End of story. And it's the law here, and they just had a decision that we have a little thing there that you're exempted if you're under 2 or a medical condition, you don't have to specify it. Sometimes I'll get a Karen, the occasional Karen, who will come up to me in a store and say, and that person is, if I can put it in biblical terms, rebuked fiercely, and my countenance is fallen. Let's put it that way. I get on them heavily. My wife gets embarrassed. She says, look, if they don't mess with me, I'll be, what they say, be kind. I'll be kind, but don't mess with me. If you mess with my rights, I'm going to come back at you, I don't care who you are, really hard. And that's how it works. Oh, by the way, I'm going to get into a religious thing, but there is a little thing in the Bible there in Job 26 about the earth. It says he stretches out the north over the empty place and hangeth the earth upon nothing. And it talks about the surface of the earth. So this flat earth stuff is garbage. And you're right, it's put out to discredit people, various people, but it's complete crap. We all know. Just take a look at that space jump. What was that guy who was jumping from space? German Baumgartner. And you take a look at it, you can see the surface. I told somebody in a church that I very briefly went to, and the churches are garbage too. Anyway, he said they were using a fisheye lens. But he's clear in the foreground. You can see it. our beautiful blue planet circling, circling the sun. And here he makes that beautiful jump. I love seeing that video. I don't know how many times. That's beautiful. Also, like Claire, another thing too. I know she uses Sibelius. I use Sibelius too. I'm a bass player.
Okay.
And I've been so bored with this stupid lockdown. I've probably done about 150 to 200.
Listen, Jeff, I'm going to have to let you go real soon. But if you're interested in doing some editing on Sibelius, send me an email because we lost our previous editor.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, does Claire have the regular program?
Yeah, we've got the programs.
Okay. So she's editing. I'm pretty good at formatting and all that
okay.
stuff.
Okay. All right. We have to let you go because we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And welcome back to our show. Last segment of the show today on this Powhana Friday, and we're going to go to Colin in Staten Hello. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
There's a big issue going on with this Q thing. And the truth is, Jews sacrifice Christian children.
Oh, come on. Come on. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to go to Jason in Arizona. Hello, Jason. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? We lost Jason, so let's go to Pat in Florida. Hello, Pat. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I couldn't get out last night on Morning Star's Tale, Don show last night, because he had a clip of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. It's real good. It's the thing if anybody wants to go look at it. But it was very interesting to me. Somebody mentioned Logan's Run, that in July of 2019, right here in Fort Worth Star-Telegram, they had a story about that in the middle of the local page because when they came up, they managed to escape. The runner escaped, come up in the Fort Worth Water Gardens over here. I think it's a curse on Fort Worth over that movie having, that part of that movie being made here. But I thought it was very interesting in July of 2019 that they should talk about a movie where you don't get to live past 35.
Yes. Yeah, there's been a couple like that. Well, I mean, remember Logan's Run?
That's what I'm talking about. That was made here.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
When they come up in the water, it was the Fort Worth Water Gardens over here.
Yes, I remember that scene.
It's hard to get rid of because it's caused people to get killed. People warned them it's too slick. You got to do something about it. The water's too fast. They didn't do it. But anyway, it was July 6, 2019, in Fort Worth Star-Telegram. It talked about that movie.
Yes.
Where you didn't live past 35. Sounds like a conspiracy to me.
Well, at some point, it's not the first movie that dealt with that. I remember when I was in high school, there was a movie that came on out that was the same thing where everybody 30 and under put everybody over 31, into concentration camps. And then the movie ends with this teenager saying, we're going to put everybody over the age of 17 out of business. So it was like this cycle, but I mean, I think one of the reasons Cuomo's facing such scrutiny right now was he putting these COVID patients into these nursing homes so that these nursing home patients who are basically a drain on state funds would pass away, and he could start saving some money that way, which would be a very cold and cynical thing to do, and that's why people are concerned. Okay?
Well, after, they all sell their soul to the devil. I don't know about him, but I sure made
Well, I tried to sell my soul to the devil, but he looked at me and said, nah, not worth it.
All right, thank you. Bye.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And this is bringing us up to the end of the program. The music should be starting in fact, there it is. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please spread the word of Republic Broadcasting Network. Spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate. We'll be back on Monday. Have a great weekend. Aloha, America.